Now to the firestorm around remarks made by Congressman Ron DeSantis, the Republican nominee for governor of Florida, about his Democratic opponent, Andrew Gillum. DeSantis is refusing to walk back his warning that voters should not, quote, monkey this up by supporting Gillum, despite criticisms that his remarks were racist and a dog whistle.
I am not going to apologize because I didn't say anything about race. It had nothing to do with race. It had to do with his far-left socialist platform.
All right, let's bring in Republican political consultant Shermichael Singleton, also Democratic strategist Don Calloway. Before we jump into this in the Florida governor's race, I want to get your thoughts on this tweet that just came out from the president moments ago. The tweet reading, Tiger Woods showed great class in a way he answered the question about the office of the presidency and me. Now they say the so-called left is angry at him. So sad, but the center and right loves Tiger, Kanye, George Foreman, Jim Brown, and so many other greats, even more. The fact that African-American unemployment is now the lowest in the history of our country, same with Asian, Hispanic, and almost every other group. The Democrats have been all talk and no action. My administration has already produced like no other, and everybody sees it. Don? The chuckle right there, but tell me what's behind the chuckle.
Yeah, my initial reaction is, so what, right? I don't look to Tiger Woods for thoughts on, nor do my parents nor common Americans look to Tiger Woods for thoughts on how we should feel about this administration. Presidential approval ratings came out in a subset of African-American views on the president, and were a subset of that. He's at an all-time low. 3% approval, 96% disapproval. 96% of African-Americans are not somehow misguided by the mainstream media. We see the president calling our ancestors coming from S-hole countries. We're aware of that. We're aware of him asking, what do we have to lose? We're aware of how he treated Hurricane Maria survivors. I mean, the proof is in the pudding with this president. He is no friend of African Americans. He is no friend of good and decency. And African American approval ratings of him are just speak to his overall approval ratings in this country, which are dismal.
Sure, Michael, especially given the tone and what we're talking about here and in Florida, where we know that the candidate there is very much a backer of President Trump. Your thoughts on that? When you hear Don saying, you know, who cares at this, and this is the climate that we have, that we're seeing seep into races like Florida?
Well, look, under the ordinary set of circumstances, a president would love to be campaigning right now in the midst of midterms with unemployment levels that low, not just for African Americans, but as listed in his tweets, other minorities and Americans by and large. The issue with Donald Trump, however, is many of his tweets and perceived character flaws that are a huge distraction from what, again, I think folks on both sides would agree would be positive, net positives rather, for most presidents, regardless of political party. I think as it relates specifically, however, to Mr. DeSantis, it would probably benefit him to just go ahead and get in front of this now, because the longer he drags this out, it's only going to become more problematic. He should issue an apology and say, hey, I did not mean to offend anyone. If I did, I apologize, and move on. By not doing so, this becomes a political issue.
Well, let's remind our viewers of those remarks. So let's listen to that and talk about it on the other side.
You know, he is an articulate spokesman for those far left views, and he's a charismatic candidate. The last thing we need to do is to monkey this up by trying to embrace a socialist agenda with huge tax increases and bankrupting the state.
All right. So we also know that he didn't, as we heard earlier, no apology there, Don. It had to do with far left socialist platform. Yeah.
And, you know, it's interesting that the comment that's coming out of that that's getting all of the scrutiny is the monkey it up. But he went and said, he started with articulate, and I forgot the second word he said, but specifically articulate and charisma indicates that African Americans are not substantive thinkers and that we cannot be policy and thought leaders, but we are here simply to be articulate and charismatic, and we're not leading based upon substance, and there's nothing real behind it. If you remember, Joe Biden said that the president was clean and articulate in 2008 when he faced then primary candidate Barack Obama. So there's several dog whistles there in what Rick DeSantis said. Not only has he not, Ron DeSantis, excuse me, not only has he not apologized, but he went on Laura Ingraham's show during this week and accepted her notion that Andrew Gillum should be apologizing to him for calling him for pointing out that this was racist. So the new racism is calling racist racist. So go figure.
Sure, Michael, to you, when you hear those words, not monkey it up. When hearing that first, your reaction?
I mean, look, I think he could have articulated the differences policy-wise between conservatism and more progressive positions.
Were you offended, though?
Personally, as a person, look, I mean, this guy went to Yale, he went to Harvard. You cannot tell me that someone with that type of academic background did not know that using such a term as it relates to any African American would not be perceived as being offensive. So, of course, I'm offended by it. I don't think it was the right words to use. Again, he could have articulated his differences policy-wise without talking about, oh, he's articulate. As Adon just said, those are terms that have been used throughout our history to sort of dehumanize in many ways African Americans, as if it's some great surprise that we have intellectual faculties, and that's not the case.
But what does it tell you about this race in Florida? If those are the words coming out of his mouth, then who is he trying to gain there as far as getting those votes to win the race?
Well, look, I don't know the exact reason behind it. I mean, again, of all the campaigns I've worked on, and I've worked on a lot of Republican campaigns, I have never advised a candidate to use those types of words to turn out a base. I'm going to presume, however, he thinks that is going to resonate with at least some part of the base within Florida by virtue of the president winning that state. But let's keep this in mind. President Obama won Florida in 2008. President Obama won Florida in 2012. There's 4.8 million registered Democrats in Florida, 4.5 million registered Republicans in Florida. However, there's 3.4 million non-affiliated voters in the state of Florida. So that state race could go in any direction. So if I was Mr. DeSantis, again, he needs to get in front of this and apologize, because he could potentially lose this race if not.
And Don, give you the last word on this. Go ahead.
I find it interesting, Shermichael. I agree with your position, but we know he won't get in front of this and apologize. He's already been particularly defiant. And then if you see on day 2 of the campaign after the primary, the extremely racist robocalls that came out, and he has said nothing. Now, who has said something is Rick Scott, who's running for the United States Senate. But in this governor's race against a progressive African-American candidate, we have nothing from Ron DeSantis, and that's shameful.
We wish we had more time with both of you. Michael Singleton, Don Calloway, thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Of course.